Hello, welcome to our special broadcast. I'm Parikshit Luthra. Donald Trump's return to the White House as America's 47th president is set to disrupt the world order yet again. This means America's trade partners would need to strategize how they would deal with Trump, a man known for his tariffs and as someone who does not go by the rule book. Donald Trump has pledged to impose 10 to 20% tariffs on all imports to the United States. Trump had earlier called India a big abuser of trade ties. This even as he shares cordial relations with Prime Minister Modi. When it comes to China, Trump has vowed to impose a 60% tariff. Is this a tailwind for India? Remember, India and the United States are closely negotiating a trade deal. India wanted restoration of GSP benefits, but the US government and Robert Lighthizer, the then USTR, wanted an equivalent. But that is where the deal actually fell through and could not really take off. We had also seen how Donald Trump had temporarily suspended the H-1B program in 2020. He had also proposed a rule which would stop the issuance of visas, work visa authorizations for spouses of H-1B holders as well. So let's see what happens under the new Trump administration. We are now joined by Anup Wadhawan, former Commerce Secretary, and we also have with us Mr. Chandrashekhar, who is the former president of NASSCOM. Anup Wadhawan, if I can begin with you, give us a sense of why the trade deal could not go off in 2020.
Yeah, 2020, it wasn't actually a trade negotiation as such. We weren't negotiating a FTA or a formal trade deal, but there were several areas, of slight friction in our trade relationship, which, as you know, is very deep and mature and has been in place for a long time. So there were some issues, there were issues, for instance, on medical devices. There were issues on market access for certain agricultural products. And ultimately, I think both sides realized that they have to respect, each other's sensitivities, and India had sensitivities on, medical devices, on public health grounds, and India had sensitivities on agricultural market access on the grounds of, the interests of low-income farmers. So ultimately, both sides, realized that, and it didn't precipitate into a crisis. And then the US went into the next election, and, things sort of got interrupted by that. So it is not as if a trade deal, or an agreement could not be reached on these areas. It was just a matter of time. We would have reached an agreement. And I'm sure to the extent these issues come up again, as indications are they might, I'm sure, both sides will respect each other's sensitivities ultimately. And our relationship is also founded, on issues beyond trade. There's a strong geopolitical foundation to our relationship. There are close ties between our leaders. There's a diaspora foundation to our relationship. So I'm sure, these trade issues will come up, as they will come up in any relationship. And in Trump's second term, there'll be, one can guess what those trade issues will be, but I don't fear any, disruptive engagement with the US.
You don't expect any disruptions, but do you feel the draft trade deal or agreement that we had with the Trump administration in 2020 could be the baseline for any future negotiations? Do you think the Indian government would now want any sort of trade pact with the US?
Yeah, I'm sure all those issues will come up again, given Mr. Trump's, views in these matters, given his various pronouncements, duties on China, I think 10% tariffs in general. So I'm sure these issues will come up again, whether it's medical devices or agricultural market access, or, access for US ethanol, access for, corn-based animal feed. So all these issues will certainly come up. I have no doubt about that, given Mr. Trump's, views on reciprocal trade, as he calls it, that trade should be balanced in goods between countries. So these issues will come up, and I think in some senses that might be a starting point where we left off at the end of his first term. So that might be a starting point. But I'm sure, given our closeness, as I mentioned, on various aspects, geopolitical, the diaspora, the rapport between the leaders, things will sort of happen in an orderly fashion, and there'll be some give and take, and I'm sure some understanding will be reached. So.
Right. Mr. Chandrashekhar, thank you very much for joining us on the program as well. We had seen a clampdown on the H-1B program, especially the spouse and wives of H-1B visa holders under the H-4 Employment Authorization Program. He had also temporarily suspended the issuance of H-1B visas, something that was turned down by courts in the United States. So what do future IT professionals looking to move to the United States for work and employment consider and keep in mind? What kind of disruptions do you expect?
I think it would be, inadequate to focus simply on restrictions on H-1 visas. I think that the relationship as far as the tech sector is concerned is quite symbiotic. The US businesses and US industry need the Indian workforce, and with newer areas like artificial intelligence and the application of artificial intelligence and the deeper cooperation across the board in technology areas as envisaged under the initiative on critical and emerging technologies. All of this requires much greater deepening of the collaboration, and movement of people or remote working, as the case may be, is a small part of that. The fact is that the US technology sector has a strong dependence on Indian talent, both in India as well as in the US. There is a strong presence of the Indian diaspora in the tech sector in the US. I don't think that there would be any steps that would be taken to disrupt that, because ultimately, I think we have to keep in mind that Mr. Trump has adopted a very pro-US business stance, and that stance itself requires that he has to be sensitive to their requirements. So this is not some favor which was done to India. This is a mutual requirement. And I believe that given that, it will continue to grow.
Okay, now, when Trump had come in 2017, he had signed the Buy American, Hire American order. Do you expect him to follow on that, maybe become more intensive and aggressive in implementing the Buy American, Hire American policy?
I think we have to keep in mind that it's one thing to issue an order. It's a completely different thing to actually ensure that that works to the benefit of your country. It's a very simple thing for any country to say, look, I will make everything, I will buy everything locally, I will not import, I will impose sky-high tariffs. But that doesn't always work to the country's advantage. And that is very well known to people and to businesses. So remember that while the broader policy thrust has been that he is supportive of American businesses, he is not supportive of US jobs being exported outside the country. But at the same time, I think the fact that their own businesses require all of these measures, I think would weigh quite strongly with him. So the Buy American, so on, is a very good political slogan. More than a political slogan, to the extent that it is practical and makes business sense, it would be pursued, but it cannot be pursued beyond a logical point. And the fortunate thing for us is that that logical point does involve a fairly high degree of collaboration, because our strengths are complementary. And both sides stand to benefit in a lot of the critical areas of technology, whether it is AI, whether it is quantum computing, whether it is telecom, whether it is semiconductors. There's a whole range of areas where the mutual dependence is quite significant. I don't think that that can be disrupted just by a policy or an executive instruction.
Okay. Mr. Wadhawan, between 2017 and 2020, in fact, this was in the last phase of the negotiations before the US elections, Washington wanted New Delhi to buy dairy and agriculture products worth $6 billion in return for restoration of GSP benefits. So, going by the kind of stand that Lighthizer, the then USTR, had taken in the negotiations, which are the sectors where you expect US would demand more market access in India and may implement reciprocal tariffs on India if not given those concessions?
So certainly, I think they have an interest in agricultural products and animal products, and they'll pursue that. Products like ethanol, corn-derived animal feed, and dairy. Of course, as you know, we were negotiating. There was an issue of the US being required to give a certification that the animals from whom the dairy products were derived had not been fed, animal-based feed. So in the US, there's a practice of feeding the cows animal-derived, feed, and that is contrary to our sort of cultural and religious concerns in India. So we were trying to find a way around that they could have some ring-fenced, farms which had different practices. So we were sort of on track to finding a solution. So I think typically agricultural products, animal products, ethanol, all these areas will be areas they will pursue. As far as tariffs are concerned, as Mr. Chandrashekhar mentioned, they have to do these things keeping their self-interest in mind. So logically, a country will impose tariffs on what it imports from the other country, and they are importing, things like pharmaceuticals, gems and jewelry, electronic products, engineering products from us. So let us say they think about imposing tariffs on pharma products. It will raise the prices for American consumers who are highly dependent on Indian generic pharma products. So it is not an easy thing to do, to impose these tariffs without harming.
I would also like to
self-interest.
ask you about very quickly about Tesla. I remember even when you were Commerce Secretary, there was this whole negotiations about getting Tesla to India. Lower duty concessions was something that Elon Musk was asking. But now, if you have a president who has received $100 million in donation from Elon Musk may not join the administration, but if he's an advisor, do you think somewhere we'll have to give those concessions to Musk and Tesla?
Just so in some senses, those concessions which are being thought of, they would be in the mutual interest of both countries. And I think what India was envisaging is to facilitate manufacturing in India with progressively higher value addition. So initially you start off with, low duties on components and somewhat higher duties maybe on the finished product, encourage investment here in India. And over time, those duties on components could also go up, or as component manufacturing, becomes domestic. So I think a policy where we have investment by companies like Tesla here with progressive, growth in value addition, that can be a win-win game for, both countries. In a sense, it's the Apple model where the intellectual property is American, most of the value is American, but America then uses 26 other countries to get the Apple phone manufactured. So some sort of model like that could work with India as the hub on manufacturing and significant value remaining in American hands. So I think some contours of that have been worked out, and I see that going forward, and that is in India's mutual interest. Ultimately, we want investment here, we want manufacturing here, and we want manufacturing with progressively growing, value addition. So that I think can
In
happen.
fact, we've already made an electric car manufacturing scheme which gives you duty concessions in return for setting up manufacturing in India. It is often said that that was done and tailored for Tesla, but that scheme is yet to take off. It's still there. It's not been revoked. Let's see how it is used. Mr. Chandrashekhar, coming to you, do you expect Trump to focus heavily on the big tech sector, the likes of Amazon, Google, Microsoft? Because the reason why I'm asking that now you are backed by a man like Elon Musk, who's very big on AI, very big on Starlink, SpaceX. He wants to also enter India in a big way. India today is working out its laws in order to determine the contours within which it wants the big tech to play. It also wants the domestic tech ecosystem to grow. So there are some concerns on that front. How do you think Trump in his second term will work for the big tech in America?
I think that as far as the big tech in the US is concerned, it can certainly be expected that he would be largely supportive of the big tech and the growth of big tech within the US. As far as the issues of the big tech in a country like India are concerned, I think he would confine his actions and his interest to actions or areas where he feels that the big tech companies are in some sense being restricted or being artificially constrained in the pursuit of their business. Having said that, I think it will also be recognized both by him and by policymakers who work with him that India, as far as its own domestic digital economy is concerned, is well within its rights to impose whatever restrictions, whatever reasonable constraints there are. The issue might come up, however, if there are constraints which are specific to foreign companies and which he sees as being discriminative. So that could be one area where there would be, some focus perhaps. But as far as the US companies in the US is concerned, I think he would be supportive of them. And that's the point I was making earlier, that some of the issues that are of concern to us are equally of concern to those domestic companies. So for them to grow, they need the kind of cooperation that we have, Indian talent going there, American investment coming here, American venture capital coming here, Indian innovation working to break new ground in the US and vice versa. Again, in areas like space, that's another area where there's a lot of room for such collaboration. So the tech sector is a perfect example of a mutuality of our interests. Just as there is a convergence of our strategic interests in the geopolitical sense, in the tech sector also, for a variety of reasons, our strengths are complementary. So I don't think that those kind of pressures would go very far. That's my sense.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Chandrashekhar, Mr. Wadhawan, for joining us with those sharp views. Let's see what happens in the Trump administration, but we will see real actions only post the 20th of January once the new government in America is sworn in. On that note, we take a short break, but don't go anywhere. Elon Musk is expected to play a crucial part in the Trump administration. What would that mean for America's electric vehicle, artificial intelligence and space sectors, where Musk is heavily invested? A conversation with the managing director of Wedbush Securities, Dan Ives, on the other side. Elon Musk and Tesla are likely to be the biggest winners from Trump's return to the White House. Wedbush Securities has predicted that Trump presidency could potentially unlock $1 trillion of incremental AI valuation for the EV maker over the coming years. Trump could also accelerate some of the full self-driving initiatives for Tesla starting in 2025. However, the outlook for the broader EV industry appears mixed. Musk, who actively campaigned for Trump, has acknowledged that the incoming administration would likely eliminate EV subsidies and tax credits. Wedbush has also said that the Trump administration's dramatically reduced regulatory framework will accelerate tech mergers and acquisitions. On the other hand, the United States' relations with both China and India remain uncertain after Trump's return. So what will this mean for Tesla's interests in China and India? We're now joined by Dan Ives of Wedbush Securities. Dan, thank you very much for joining us again on CNBC-TV18. What a week it's been in the United States. No one had predicted. Yes, there was speculation of a Trump victory, but maybe not so decisively across the swing states and different sections of the population in the Senate as well. Now, let me begin by asking you, what does this really mean for investors? The Wall Street over the last few months had been concerned about a slowdown in Tesla sales in China, slowdown in production in key geographies as well. Do you think the fact that he invested so heavily personally and financially in the Trump campaign, and now Trump has been elected decisively, have those concerns of investors been put to rest?
Look, I mean, this is a champagne moment for Musk. I'd say one of his biggest strategic bets could pay off in the form of trillions for Tesla over the coming years. Because, look, Trump is going to now have Musk as really a huge voice within the White House. And I think autonomous FSD could get accelerated. The EV tax credits get thrown out, and that's bullish for Tesla because of their scale and scope. You cannot have a better scenario in terms of a red sweep and Trump in the White House if you're Musk and Tesla or as a Tesla investor.
What do you think this will mean for advancing the electric vehicle program of Tesla? India and Elon Musk have been discussing a possible factory line in India, sales in India. Do you think Elon Musk may now consider setting up shop in India, setting up a manufacturing base, maybe starting sales at an early date?
Look, I mean, you know, me and you have talked about this before in terms of on India with Musk. I think the timing wasn't right, but now with regulatory framework reduced, Trump in office, I'd expect acceleration of Tesla's build out globally, including India. I think India's always sort of been on the cusp where they were going to invest there. I just think the timing wasn't right, and there were a lot of balls in the air. But now with Trump in the White House, this is an emboldened Musk and emboldened Tesla that's on their next stage of growth.
Right. So this gives them confidence to move ahead in a very strong manner. How do you think Trump is going to balance the US relationship with China, considering that his biggest donor has a major factory in China? The products that they make in China are sold on Chinese streets. They are also exported to other markets. Do you think that Trump will follow a balanced approach to the China relationship?
I think it's going to be balanced with carve-outs. I think part of why the reaction you saw with tech stocks yesterday, Tesla and others, is the view to have Musk as sort of a right-hand person for Trump is a positive for the tech industry. It's someone that understands AI, understands China, understands tariffs. And I think despite what could be harsh tariffs, I think there will be, we'll call them carve-outs for the likes of Tesla and Apple.
So you will see harsh tariff regimes, but there will be carve-outs for companies like Tesla and Apple. You've also said that Trump in the White House would mean heightened deal activity, M&A activity in the United States, the key sectors where you expect the highest amount of investments?
Look, take any horror movie, your favorite horror movie, Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th. That's been Lina Khan from the FTC for big tech. She's going to be gone from the FTC with Trump in. And that's bullish for deal making, bullish for big techs, less regulatory. And I think we're going to have massive M&A, both on private and public, within tech. It's going to be a golden era for deal making with Khan out at the FTC and Trump in office.
What kind of role do you expect Elon Musk to play in the Trump presidency? If he formally joins the administration, he will have to resign as CEO. Do you expect him to set aside his business roles, or you think he will only be associated Trump in an advisory or just a friendly capacity?
I think he's going to be heavily involved, but not in a quote-unquote official manner from a cabinet position. Because just like you said, that would be complicating in terms of his business interests. He's going to be the whisperer for Trump. I'd say one of his top strategic advisors. And that's bullish for the tech sector, bullish for AI, very bullish for Tesla. And I think this is really going to accelerate autonomous and FSD with Trump now at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
So you expect him to join the administration?
Not officially, because if he joined, then there would be a lot of issues in terms of his ownership. But he's going to be unofficially the whisperer for Trump. Call him.
Right. We got that. And I think your line is also dropping, Tan. But thank you so much for joining us. You made it very clear that Elon Musk will be Trump's whisper, and he will play a very important role in the White House, unofficially, however. Thank you once again for being with us here on CNBC TV 18. With that, it's a wrap on this edition of News Center. More news and updates continue right here.